I want to tell you all a story that goes back in our history, way back. I'm going to tell you about some jungle fowl. And these are birds that was raised in the jungle. And the old rooster had him a harem of hens. And he took care of them, he bred them, he protected them or whatever. And then as they had eggs hatch out, there'd be biddies there. And they'd grow up and some of the roosters would get kind of froggy. And he wouldn't tolerate that. He'd go over and beat them up and run them off. So they'd leave, and he'd have his hens. But in a year or two, they would grow up and become cocks. And when they did that, they'd come back and want to run him off. Them or some from another harem somewhere come over there. And he's very determined. He would not take no for an answer. You know, he'd run them off. They'd either die on the spot or run away. And this went on for years. Mother Nature played a real cruel trick on him. And as he got old, his spurs grew at a different angle. And he couldn't hit where he thought he was hitting like he used to with straight spurs. And they'd end up killing him. So that was how they came about. They didn't know how to quit. So anyway, they brought them over to different countries and they got to where they would pit them together, the roosters. Ours basically come from England, and the English had been fighting them for quite some time. I really believe that that's where sword fighting with the fencing swords came about, because they used a sharp pointed piece of steel to stab each other with like roosters did. So, but they brought them over here, and in the 1920s or 30s or even before maybe, they had no real anything for excitement or to do. The farmers had horses and they could maybe race one once in a while, but hell, there's plow horses, they wasn't made for racing. And of course the Spanish brought the bulls and they fought them once in a while, and it didn't never really catch on here. There's a few dog fighters, and that didn't catch on either. It was pretty bloody. And so then the cocks come along, and they brought them over. And Abraham Lincoln, when he was president, he put a cockpit in the basement of the White House. And that's where he got his name of Honest Abe. He was a renowned referee in the pit. Because in the pit, you got 2 roosters, 2 handlers, and 1 referee. And that's the way it was. So it became a very popular sport, and when it did, as times got better, it turned into gambling. Then money began to enter into it, and things began to change. The people with money would go to a rancher or a farmer, especially people that have horse stables, and they'd say, you know, I'll buy every chicken you got, or else you kill them and butcher them. But I don't want another chicken on here, but I'll bring some game chickens out here, and we're just going to turn them loose and let them do what they do naturally. And they really felt this got a lot of vitamins and minerals from eating around the horses and all that kind of stuff. So that's what they call a walk. So you go out and you pay this man to get rid of his chickens, and then you tell him that as they hatch off, you let me know and I'll come out and I'll pick up the stags, which is young roosters. And so then you go out there with an old fighting cock and you have him on a tie cord, and you just lay him down on the ground in front of them little stags. Man, they'll come to him to fight. And while they're fighting, you just reach down, pick them both up and put them in the pen, go get you another stag. And this is the way it was done. And you take them back and you raise them, feed them, give them the best of everything. And when he comes a cock, then you condition him for about 30 days. And at the end of 30 days, he's ready to go to a derby. And like in the derbies we fought, you'd have a 5-cock derby. And so you'd put up about 8 or 10 roosters for 30 days. You exercise them, you feed them the best you can think of, have the hens run around where they can see them and keep them going. And then you take them, when they're ready, you go ahead and go to the pit, wherever it is. Travel a few miles. You got to travel for, you travel at night, keep them quiet, rested. You get there and you let them out, let them scratch in a scratch pen, and then you put it back in the dark box. And you, when they call for it, you go up front and you sign in your entry name. And ours was Florida Sandspur Farms. And so then when you sign in, they take each rooster and they set him on a scale and they weigh him right down to ounce. And then they put a band on his leg with a number. Now you take your rooster back and you put him in the dark box, and they will take all those band numbers and they'll match up roosters that weighs the same. And pretty soon they'll call up band number so and so from whatever entry, and you go up there with your rooster and they double check the weight, make sure you didn't change bands, and try to keep it straight and honest as they could. And then you pitch your rooster, and if you won all the bets. When you go in the pit, you bet the guy that's got the rooster across from you. And if he says he wants $100, then you say, okay, then that's that bet. Once you all have got your bet settled, then the bystanders is open to start betting. So they can bet you or another bystander or anybody they want to. And then when it's all said and done, they say pitch your birds, and they got a line drawn in the sand down there. It's just damp sand when you get traction. And you set your rooster down on that, and he's already seen the other rooster, and you turn him loose, and it begins. And you got different ways of roosters to fight. You got some that are called shufflers. He'll sit on his butt, he'll run over there to the rooster, sit on his butt, and then try to reach up and get him with his spurs. Then you got others that are flyers, and when you turn him loose, he goes straight up in the air, and he tries to attack him from the top. He'll settle down on him and hit him with his spurs then. So there's a lot to see. And if you win more fights than anyone else, then you win the derby. Some of the derbies, they'd say, well, it's a $500 derby. So that's $100 a piece for your bird to enter. So depending on how many people there, that's how big the pot is. And if you win more fights than anybody else, then you get the biggest percentage of that pot, because the pit will get a cut out of it. So that's the way it was gambled on. They did use metal gaffs, which was tied onto the leg of the chicken to replace his spur. They had rules on them, the length, and they couldn't be real fine on the end, so they couldn't break or bend and really damage the bird when you pulled it out. And that made it pretty even and legal again. So that pretty well took care of that part of the cockfights. But you got to stop and think, back in the 20s or 30s or whenever, people didn't have no recreation. They had no place to go, nothing to do. And it was become one of the largest spectator sports in the country. So I guess that gives you some ideas of how cockfighting was and where it started. And it's just been something nice to be able to tell y'all.